I kid you not. When Davius Richard got hurt at the HBCU Legacy Bowl, there was a part of me that left for the next 3 hours and never returned. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU Podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to make every moment more. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 winning bet. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at SWAC basketball, the Jackson State, Alcorn, and Texas Southern Triangle. So no, we're not speaking on the state of Mississippi. We're speaking on the state of the SWAC standings. But we kick it off with a little two-part in the HBCU Legacy Bowl. I have a few takeaways that I'll give you in segment 2, but we kick it off with the worst news possible and honestly the most defeating moment and impactful moment of the HBCU Legacy Bowl. North Carolina Central quarterback Davius Richard went down with an injury. He had to be carted off the field. It's an ankle injury. I've heard a couple of different things, but either way, it's not good. He had to be put in an air cast and carted off the field. Davius Richard's injury was a blend of unnecessary risks. And I want to be very clear, we are not blaming Davius Richard in this. That's not what we're doing because he's a competitor. And I understand why he wanted to play. You're a football player. Of course, you're going to go out there. But my thing is somebody should have gotten his ear. Somebody should have said, you don't need to do this. And saying he didn't need to do this is not a way to put down the Legacy Bowl at all. It's not that at all because Sundiata Anderson didn't show. Felt like he did well enough at the East-West Shrine Bowl. I get it. Jarvion Howard felt like he showed enough in the first, I think, maybe 1 or 2 days of practice in the HBCU Combine. He left. It's about mitigating your risks. And if those who are showing him counsel, him being Richard, say he should have left, I really feel like he would have. And I wish that he would have. And this isn't me speaking in hindsight, saying that he didn't need to be here. I said this on Thursday. I didn't watch a day of practice. And I told you, Davius Richard doesn't gain much from being here. Maybe it boosts his stock, but not by much. Not by much at all. And, you know, I hate to be somber about this, but this was avoidable. This didn't need to happen. And I don't know, maybe it didn't need to be the people who are showing him like, hey, this is the way, this is your pre-draft process. I don't know. I know that Davius Richard did not need to be put in this position, whether it was people telling him you don't need to play in this game, which would have been completely understandable. Everything you've done has been put on film and they know you. Or if you're just going to the coaches, why was Davius Richard running? I kid you not. Right before that play, I said, I don't really like that Richard's playing, but at least he's not running. And he was looking good throwing the ball. But at least he's not running. And I understand that Davius Richard is a dual threat quarterback. I understand that the power of him and what makes him special is his ability to be just as deadly with his arm as he is with his legs. I get it. But you're in a goal line situation. Why are we running Davius Richard? No, when he ran, did I think that the injury was going to happen? No. But I tell you what, I did think he was going to get hit. And it wasn't a necessary hit. It was an unnecessary risk. When you look at Davius Richard's injury, it's a blend of unnecessary risk all the way from the start to the finish. And he's not at fault in any of it. This was a designed run. It was called for him to do what he does best. Of course he's going to do it. Of course, even if it's a read option, you still got to have the proper reads. You still have to make the right play. And the right play is knowing when to pull and when to give. Because if you give when you're supposed to pull, well, that's an X. That's a negative play. So you got to operate correctly. And he got in like he usually does. But then he had the injury. And if you haven't seen the injury, please don't look it up if you're what's called weak stomach. It didn't look good. Didn't look good. Didn't need to see it twice. But this was so avoidable. Whether it was from that play call or from just not being there. And you know, the first drive, masterclass. The first drive was a masterclass. I mean, operating over the middle of the field, looking efficient. It was great offense. And, you know, as I was preparing for it, I was like, oh, Gaither finna smash this team. That was the MEAC and CIAA team. And I think they also had all the independents. I thought, yeah, they're going to smash this team. No doubt about it. You know, but when that injury happened in the press box, you felt something leave. It was different. I don't know what happens with Davius Richard draft-wise if he's healthy. I don't. But I do know that it drastically hurt his chances. And not only that, I feel like he was the guy who we all like, he's the guy. Don't matter. He plays a position that we all wanted to point at, and we had hopes that he could be the one who gets drafted. But he was the guy, and everybody saw an excellent talent. I wish he didn't play. I don't think he needed to play. And that is not an indictment on our HBCU events. People skip out on the combine. I don't need to test, or I won't test here. The NFL scouting combine. There's people who don't show up to the Senior Bowl. I don't need to do that. There's people who do this at all of these events. So when I'm telling him to skip it, it's not about HBCU pride. It's about your draft stock and what is best for you. Nobody could have predicted that Davius Richard was going to suffer a devastating ankle injury. But I do believe that there was multiple ways that they could have avoided it, and they didn't take any of those avenues. Now, as we continue, we'll look at some of the other takeaways, such as what happened when Davius Richard left. It wasn't pretty, but I'll detail it as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Basketball is in full stretch. I'm excited. I was in Louisiana watching the Pelican game, saw the fight. I'm excited, right? But what about you? You excited to make a little bit of money? This ain't just about viewing it. This isn't just about watching it, being a fan. This is about being a winner. This is about going to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to make every moment more. This is about going and getting that free $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 winning bet and you're new to FanDuel. That's what this is about. This is about saying, you know what, whether it's basketball, whether it's NHL, whether it's football futures and in the draft, whatever it is, I'm here to make money. Now, here's my thing. If you miss the start of the game, that's okay. Don't forget they always have live betting. So whether you get there before the game or if you get there in the third quarter, there's still opportunities until that final whistle blows for you to be able to make money. But in order to do it, you got to go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. First of its kind, 24/7 sports network on YouTube, live content. Now, real quick before we get into the disclaimers or into the takeaways, I want to give a quick disclaimer. If you're not Davius Richard, don't skip. Everybody can't skip these events. I just want to be very clear. Most of the players there needed to play. Davius Richard was an exemption. Exception, I should say. He didn't need to play. But I don't want you to think I'm just advocating for everybody to skip this game and turn into how bowl games are in the FBS level after the season, but before the national championship. No. Davius Richard was one of the people who had the ability to skip this bowl game. That's it. I wanted to get that disclaimer out there. Now to other takeaways. Once Davius Richard left, quarterback play went to crap. It was terrible. It was an ugly game. It was not a good product on the field this year. It just simply wasn't. And if you're looking for all these hoorah and happiness. This wasn't it. I didn't think that this was a great game, specifically by the quarterbacks. And when your quarterback play is bad, it's pretty difficult to get anything else going. The running game wasn't overly effective, so it was a lot of must-pass situations. And they also went to must-pass, or not must-pass, but they also went to passing on first downs. It wasn't helpful. So now, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10. You're in 2nd and 3rd and longs, so now you're more likely to pass the ball. Quarterbacks were sailing passes high. They were dropping them to the dirt. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. I did think that there was a poor game plan in this matchup. There was for the quarterback specifically, there was a lot of deep out routes. Those aren't good throws, like to get into a rhythm. And you have quarterbacks who are going in and out, in and out, in and out. So you're not really getting into a rhythm, and you're also giving them some of the more difficult passes. I seen some hitch routes to the outside. That was good because it wasn't, wasn't really a dangerous pass. But a 10-yard out route to the wide side of the field, that favors the cornerback. It favored the cornerback. And, when the quarterbacks did deliver the ball well, it was frustrating. It wasn't a lot of good passes, but on a couple of them, couldn't find a connection, whether the wide receiver wasn't looking for it or the wide receiver couldn't catch it. I did think there was a really nice ball by Quentin Williams. I think he threw that to, I think it was either Mobley or Lockhart. It was one of the two, the Mobley or Lockhart at the wide receiver position. I believe it was a deeper pass down the left side of the field going towards, it doesn't matter where they're going towards. That doesn't affect anything. But it was a deep pass in the third quarter, towards the beginning of the third quarter. I think it was the first drive. But Zarion Hayes looked good, right? But it was ugly football. And that's my thing. It was difficult to decide what defensive backs looked good. There was a lot of almost, but should have been interceptions. They were dropped. It was bad on secondary and wide receiver situations. I seen a slant pass to Marcus Riley in the third quarter from Jeremy Musa. And I said, thank you. Finally, an easy pass over the middle. All of these passes to the boundary, and that ain't it. That ain't it. Get these guys into a rhythm. Let's get some good football going. It wasn't good football on anybody's account, in my opinion. But the defensive line of Team Robinson did look good, specifically Zarion Hayes. That was one thing that I was able to evaluate independent of the quarterback play, because I saw him getting in the backfield. We were trying to discuss who was going to be the offensive and defensive MVPs. Davius Richard was the offensive MVP. He only played one series. That's how bad offense was. We couldn't find anything. Meanwhile, with Team Hayes, or not Team Hayes, but with the defensive MVP, it was easily Zarion Hayes. He was the most dominant guy. So the biggest winner to me was Zarion Hayes. I thought he looked amazing, to be honest. He jumped off the screen. Go follow, if you haven't already. I think it's Coach_Huggins Jr., JR. He's way more detailed and has a long list of guys from halftime. And make sure you check him out, because he's always putting up great stuff. You think we just bring him on the show because I like him? Nah, man. Taymon Cook. He was a good special teams player. And this is the returner from North Carolina A&T. For me, I wanted to see what he was going to look like returning. I wanted to see what he looked like as a receiver. After Richard left, I told you the quarterback play was terrible. Wasn't really much to see from him there. So now I noticed him on the gunner, because there was a lot of punting. There was a lot of punting in this game. And I noticed him as a gunner. And when I seen that, I said, all right, let's look and see what he does on special teams when he's not returning. I thought he had a really good get off, a nice burst, a nice path, nice elusivity when approaching the second defender. I thought that if this is a guy who is going to be a special teams player, he can be a returner and then also a gunner. I really liked what I seen from Taymon Cook. And I was sitting next to Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, special teams lover, right? Like he got special teams something for Valentine's Day. That's how much he loves special teams. And he stamped them. He said, oh, that was a really good rep. Of course, we didn't see a lot of them, but in the limited reps I saw, I thought that he showed good long speed, good burst, and just good path to the returner on most times. So I think that he's going to be very valuable to somebody. And then my last takeaway in this situation is we had an NFL rules moment. And I don't know how often these things happen in Senior Bowls, East-West Shrine Bowls, and all of these pre-draft bowl games, right? Because you have the postseason bowl games, which is team versus team, but then you have these pre-draft bowl games, which are essentially like all-star games. Speaking of all-star, if you didn't check out my episode with Travis L. Williams from HBCU All-Stars that aired on Friday, the HBCU All-Star basketball game, make sure you check that out. That game's coming up at the beginning of April. So we have about a month and some change, a month and a half before we get to that. But yeah, so the NFL rule moment, right? In these all-star games, you have college players who are used to playing under college rules. And I think you see that a lot with defensive backs who is like, they're very handsy because you can be more physical for longer on the college level. But when you get to the pro level, those are whistles, right? So I think you may see a lot of that, getting that acclimation, or maybe you might see a guy only got 1 foot instead of 2. It wasn't a catch, right? But those are a little bit less obvious. This moment with Lyndon Rash, I thought this was one of the better moments of the game, as he caught a pass over the deep or over the middle of the field. And this was the only Robinson touchdown. He caught a pass over the middle of the field. He rolled after catching it, right? Just went to the ground after catching it. Nobody touched him. He tried to get up, stumbled again, rolled. Nobody thought anything of it. He got up and ran. That was a wise play. That was, hey, I understand the rules. Touchdown, Lyndon Rash. Touchdown, Team Robinson. It was their only score of the day. And it wasn't a moment to be like, hey, how did you guys know the rules? We're not going to San Francisco 49ers these guys. But what we will do is commend Lyndon Rash for realizing I'm not wearing Gramblin's uniform anymore. I'm not in college. These are pro rules. And let me go ahead and score myself a touchdown by taking advantage of those, not knowing or being unaware of the rules. It's an easy mistake to make. I think once you get in the NFL, it's second nature. But in that situation, it wasn't. So as we push forward, though, we're done with the HBCU Legacy Bowl for now. We'll be back with that tomorrow and some of my standouts independently. I thought I'd do the takeaways first, then do the standouts. So we'll be back on that on Tuesday's episode. But for right now, we're going to transition into some basketball and look at Jackson State, Alcorn, Texas Southern, and the triangle that they form in this SWAC standings and why these are the 3 teams you really need to focus on throughout this next week of action. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making all the way to segment 3. And thank you 2 times for that. I'm just coming off vacation too. All right. So sometimes I forget my own stuff, but we cooking. We going to get back rolling. I appreciate you though, no matter what. Thank you. Thank you. Texas Southern, Jackson State, and Alcorn triangle is the one to watch in this week of action in SWAC men's basketball. Heading into the weekend, so going into Saturday's games, these 3 teams were tied for 3rd place, right? Jackson State and Alcorn played each other. TSU faced Mississippi Valley. I've been waiting to just okay, Darian, breathe. Because for some reason, I've just been sitting here waiting to know who was going to be the one team that loses to Valley this year. Maybe it's nobody. I don't know. But you don't want to be that team. Valley hasn't won a game against anybody all year long. You don't want to be the team that they beat. And I kind of view every single Mississippi Valley State game as a trap game. So I was like, all right, I already kind of had my eyes on this, but I had to make sure it was my peripheral vision. I had to make sure I wasn't staring at this 3-game stretch that TSU is about to go on, and instead make sure I'm looking at this game right in front of me. That's what I need to make sure I'm looking at, right? Even though I'm not even playing and where my focus is largely irrelevant, I still wanted to make sure that I wasn't, overlooking Mississippi Valley. And I really just didn't want to be the squad that lost to them. It didn't happen. Thank you. Sweat removed. Dry my face. But now you're looking at a 3-game stretch for TSU that incorporates Jackson State and Alcorn. They started off with UAPB, but it goes Jackson State and Alcorn after that. Jackson State and Alcorn faced off this past weekend. Alcorn came up victorious. So now you're looking at TSU tied with Alcorn alone at that number 3 seed. I know Bethune-Cookman is tied with Jackson State at 5th. Yes, so Jackson State is now dropped to 5th, and they're tied with Bethune-Cookman. But this triangle that I'm speaking about is not just because I believe that they're competitive or these are the biggest threats or whatnot. This is because Texas Southern plays UAPB, Jackson State, then Alcorn. So the impact of TSU's games over the next 3 weeks will have a big impact on the standings of Jackson State and Alcorn, not Bethune-Cookman. So that's why they're not involved in this conversation. Not because of quality, just because of context. And you got to get through. This is similar to the Bethune, ironically. This is similar to the stretch that TSU went on, I think maybe last week and a half ago, where they had to play Bethune-Cookman, Grambling, then Southern. Right? That was a 3-game stretch that was very difficult. I need TSU to win this first game. I need TSU to come out, and I need TSU to defeat UAPB, because there's a lot of stress, and this time I do mean stress, that will be placed on the next 2 games versus Jackson State and versus Alcorn if that doesn't happen. If that doesn't come into play, like if you lose that game, now I feel like even splitting might not be good. I'm trying to figure out who's going to be the top 4 teams in this conference. TSU or Grambling and Southern are going to be 1 and 2 probably, unless Grambling goes on some sort of fall. But those are probably going to be 1 and 2. Alcorn, Jackson State, TSU, Bethune-Cookman. Those are the 4 teams that are in the mix. Those are the 4 teams that are in the mix for 3 through 5 or 3 to 6, right? And I want to see who's going to be 3 and 4. There's only 2 teams out of that bunch that can make it. And quite frankly, they ain't that far from the other squads. They 1 game away if you look at Jackson State and Bethune-Cookman. TSU needs to win this game against UAPB, because UAPB is one of them 7-7 squads. Now you can elevate to 10-5. I'm looking for comfort. The last seed is 7-7 right now. The first team out is 7-7 right now. TSU and Alcorn at 9-5. With any sort of slight stumble, you could be out. Jackson State, Bethune-Cookman, they got 6 losses, 8-6. With any sort of slight stumble, you could be out. Then we start talking about, okay, what is tiebreakers in this situation? It's not difficult to see yourself out of it. Texas Southern needs to come out and win 2 of the 3. That's my opinion. TSU needs to win 2 out of the 3 between their matchups against UAPB tonight, Jackson State, then Alcorn. You got to win 2 out of the 3 games in order to feel comfortable. And then you're like, all right, I think I might be able to be in that top 4. Bethune-Cookman, yes, they're a part of this conversation, but not in this context because they don't play any of the teams involved over the next week. Monday, Saturday, then the next Monday. Bethune-Cookman has to face Grambling and Southern. We'll see how this goes. Just for the record, Alcorn holds the tiebreaker over Jackson State because their victory was by more points, so the point differential goes to Alcorn. Jackson State did defeat TSU the first time they played. Texas Southern defeated Alcorn the first time they played. So if I'm obviously looking for 3-0, but if I'm looking for the team that I feel like you need to beat, it's Jackson State, because I don't want to get swept by anybody. You never want to be swept by anybody. They weren't swept by Grambling. They weren't swept by Southern. I'm trying to think what other teams they've played twice. They've already beat PV, so they won't be swept by them. I don't want to go through it, and I don't think they got swept by Bethune-Cookman if they haven't played them. If they played them twice, I don't think they got swept. But I also think they might have only played them once. They did. They did only play Bethune-Cookman once. So it's situations you want to avoid. If you're Texas Southern and you're over these next 3 games against 3 teams that are extremely close, right? Extremely close in the SWAC standings to you and could easily be over you by the end of this week. By next Tuesday, could easily be over you. You need to make sure you come out and you handle business, because things are about to get real tight. And I would hate if my Tigers were claustrophobic. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. We'll be looking towards that triangle. We'll probably review the beginning of that. Jackson State and Alcorn don't play tonight, so we might review that TSU versus UAPB game. Maybe we might review that on Wednesday, Thursday, somewhere down the line. But I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Tomorrow we'll be looking at the co-MVPs, which is Davius Richard and Jeremy Musa. I'm not a fan of that. And we'll also be looking at some of the HBCU Legacy Bowl standouts. So we got a full day of work tomorrow. I can't wait. I'm probably going to get to it extremely soon. So let me go ahead and do that. Until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.